Welcome to part 29 of the mod making series for locked loot containers. This time I have the mic's auto filter turned on, so my apologies for the last one where I forgot to do that. Yeah, this one is going to be a probably fairly quick one where I did some stuff behind the scenes or whatever. I did some stuff. I don't even know when I started, probably about like 6, probably 7 p.m. I actually started doing, like, going through this code and stuff and trying to do some stuff. And now it's like almost 10:30, it's like 10:20 p.m. So I've been at it for a few hours. I haven't been working on it the whole time, but for a good portion of that time, I've been trying to get some stuff. Um, and in terms of, like, in general stuff, I didn't really get that much done, but it's once again, it's one of those things where I got the ball rolling, and for the next one that I actually do, which should hopefully make it easier, as well as I got some conceptual ideas down for how I'm going to do stuff tomorrow. But I did get some stuff done today, so let's go over that real quick. First, I had to add this line, utility for one of the simple things that was like dice roll 100 or something. Just, yeah, I'm just gonna go down this. And then up farther in the add chest on transition dungeon interior thing, up here where we did the permitted materials, I added a new variable, an int, called base chest odds. And I set it to 20 by default. And this, at least currently, I'm using now to determine the base. In this case, it's just going to be a chance from 0 to 100, or, like, whatever to 100 max, 100% kind of thing. Yeah, just say 0 to 100, let's say. And I modified this value based on the dungeon type being evaluated, or being that the player is currently in. So some different dungeon types will have different base odds for a chest to generate when evaluating a loot pile, and just any loot pile through this entire process. This whole thing, as well as these values, is pretty placeholder, I'll say. Like, I have no definite, like, oh yeah, this is definitely 100% what the value is going to be for each one, but I just kind of did, like, some general values. I was like, okay, so it's probably more likely in strongholds or castles or Dragon's Den. Dragon's Den, for for a chest to generate, for there to be protected kind of loot, so that somebody would put in a chest kind of deal. Valuables. And then in the ones that are less likely, like, I guess, natural cave and mines and prisons, giants, giant strongholds, stuff, spider's nest, stuff like that. I added a closer to this base value of 21, or just a little bit higher than that slightly. So some are significantly higher than that, others are either the same, or they're a little bit higher, or that kind of thing. And yeah, like I said, these will probably be changed later, but for right now, should be fine. Just to note, it looks pretty ugly. It doesn't have to be like this. I'm just doing it now to keep the line count down, so it's a little bit, I don't have to scroll down and up as much. Because, you could just, the way that C# or whatever works as a language, whatever that, these bracket based, I don't know what you call them, these these kind of languages where you could end lines with the with this symbol. I forget what it's called. Is it a semicolon? Whatever the hell it is. You can end lines with this, so you could have, like, any number that you want. Like, if you wanted to, you can make it, I guess, in theory, if you wanted to, you can make an entire program that's just on one line, technically, but just has each one broken up by these semicolon symbols or whatever. But yeah, in this case, I'm just using it to kind of keep the verticality down for now, but later on for readability, I will most likely have a proper space for each different variable just so it's easier to read. But yeah, that's doesn't matter for right now, really. Let me see these comments. Continue work on here tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. Modify the term in the odds, a certain blah, blah, blah. Size of certain overlap boxes. Toggle settings for the... I'll just leave that for now. Maybe I'll take out one or two lines. Yeah, because you don't want to... You want to bloat up your code with comments that are just, like, irrelevant at the moment that you're actually working on it kind of thing. Just because then after a while it gets confusing and you want to have the comments be relevant, which is probably why I should date almost all of them myself, but I usually don't, just in some special cases. In value, to assist in the formula, turn this loop pile over to replace the chest. I'm already doing that. Rarity and overall value will likely actually start going from a blah blah blah. Consider more on specifics tomorrow, wherever you get, yeah. So I can get rid of those comments now. So now I added this new method called roll if chest should be created. I'll probably change that name because it's a little bit wordy, but I think it explains it pretty well. Roll if chest should be created, where this loot pile is. And it's taking an argument for the loot pile being looped through in this case. So loot piles I, whatever the current iteration is for this for loop, this big for loop. Allowed materials, these are the arguments in it. Based chest odds, which we defined before, and the thing that we did yesterday, the total room value mod. And it's going down just below here. It's this method. Protect, blah, 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 blah. Tweak and possibly reconsider, blah, 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 blah. But, yeah, in this method, it is a void, so it is not returning anything. It's just doing work in itself. And then we have the base chest odds plus the room value, which is making a new, are summing together to make a new value called chest odds. So it's combining the base odds with the modified thing that we got for the room context for a final kind of value, in this case for chest odds, which is being used to roll if a chest is going to be generated here or not. And just in general, not like any other factors, just if any kind of chest should be created here or not. And with that, if it ends up to be either 0 or less, like a negative value, or 0, then it immediately returns, so it stops this, and then it doesn't create a chest where this loop pile is. But if it is not 0 or below, if it's 1 or above, yeah, if it's 1 or above, or in this case, it would be only from 1 to 100 at most, or at least, for this dice 100 success roll. So if this roll is, I think, equal or below what the value is that we're giving it, that is considered a success or true, or returns true. And this is basically if that roll does not succeed, then it does the same thing as what just happened before up there, and it just returns, or it does nothing. And there is no chest being generated in that case. But if the roll succeeds, then it's like, okay, so yes, there is a chest that should be generated here, and then it does that whole process that we've already done before, where we did the whole, like, take the old loot pile, stuff, characteristics we care about. It's like position, it's transform, the actual loot that's inside of a collection, its load ID, and then put it into our new parent object that we're creating in its same position at least. Transfer all that over, yada yada yada. But then after all that, or somewhat after all that, in the middle of all that, we want to start adding stuff that we didn't have before, that being the actual properties of the chest in question, such as the material, potentially traps, but we're going to do that later on, as I said, but potentially traps will be determined here as well, but mainly the material of the chest, material of the lock, um, possibly some other factors, but that's the main ones, like the material of the chest, material of the lock, like I said, some other factors, and maybe as well with that, the actual like value overall of the chest. Possibly, we're probably not going to generate loot just here yet. We still have to do that, but this is going to be where primarily it's determined what material should this chest be in some way. What condition should the chest be in, and what material. And by that, later on, it'll determine what rarity it is and what value it is, blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm trying to do here, and that's where I kind of left off. And I was thinking I was going to get to some of this today, but then I was like, you know what? This is going to be a more complicated, not so much more complicated, but a little bit more work than I was thinking for this specific part that I'm trying to do. Just because I have the whole permitted materials thing and the flags with that and everything. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to make a shitty way to actually roll the materials. I want it to be like actually like a somewhat possibly decent way to do it, I guess. I don't know. One where it's not just like, oh, okay, this material is this chance and that material. I don't know. I wanted it to sort of based on what the allowed materials, permitted materials are, of the possible ones, I wanted the odds to kind of like be equal, kind of like I wanted them to be evenly distributed based on what are allowed or not. So it's like I'm poorly explaining this. Like I yeah, I'm doing a very bad job explaining it, but the way I'm gonna try to do it is I have this long comment I wrote out to remind me tomorrow when I actually do start working on this part. So I'll just kind of read it out. Basically, well, I won't read it out because it is helpful to that I have it written down that way. But basically, what I'm gonna try to do is something that I did with my other mods myself, where such as jewelry editions, which is like one that I used it a lot. A few other conceptual things I did. Even though for the plate armor and the plate weapons, or whatever you want to say, the plate materials, the vanilla DFU formula for that, it's an interesting way it does it. I mean, it obviously kind of sucks, and it's kind of important to it that it is based on the player's level and stuff, and how it's modified and everything. So it's level scaled and all that crap. And it works for that, even though it's kind of broken in other ways, just because I mean, that's just how it works in vanilla Daggerfall. Like, the higher level you get, the substantially higher level, or chances that you get for more expensive and rare materials, and it just becomes, like, ridiculous after a bit. But that's how it works, in its way. But I wanted to do a thing where it's kind of like you have my analogy for it is that I put down here is kind of like a hat full of tickets, like raffle tickets or something. So in that hat, you have a limited amount of tickets that you have that will be put in there and filled out or whatever. So let's say hypothetically you have like 100 tickets that you're allowed to fill that hat with, and whatever person or whatever thing is going to be written on each ticket, each one has a different amount that it is allowed to be allocated of that 100. So let's say like hypothetically, wood chests get 90 of those tickets, and then the rest of them get two each or something like that, two tickets each. Well, obviously, then it's much significantly more likely that wood is going to be chosen of those tickets compared to the rest of them. But that's kind of what I'm going to try to do, even though, like I said, I'm not doing a great way of explaining it, where it's like each material based on whatever the list of the permitted materials of the enum list of values that there are allowed in this particular circumstance. Even if it was like not just the ones that we defined, but even if we added different ones where it was like weird stuff like adamantium is allowed, iron is allowed, wood is allowed, but nothing else or some shit like that, it would hopefully in this case still evenly distribute, or not so much evenly distribute them, but distribute them based on their rarity, but also evenly amongst that, not evenly, but distribute them by that limited amount of tickets that are allowed. Um, so like, but also have it so the more rare materials there is always going to be less of those tickets for the rare materials in there compared to the more common ones. And but somehow modify that, whatever does that modifier for that, for how many tickets of the rare ones it should be allowed to give of that allocated amount, somehow modify that positively or negatively, like in favor of the rare materials or against them, based on what the room modifier is, that room modifier value that we have from this method, the total room value mod. So if this is negative, we want to somehow modify it so the more common materials down the list will be allowed to get more tickets, but then the rare ones will conversely get less tickets, or the other way around, where this is like a positive value or higher than some threshold, then that'll actually increase how many tickets that the rare materials are allowed to have, and then decrease the tickets that the more common materials are allowed to have. So that's the idea I'm trying to go for. So, and then at the end of all that, when those tickets are put in the hat, just pick one, and then whatever one gets picked, use that material, basically. And that's kind of the hope. I'm not sure how it'll really work in, like, practice. The one thing that I will have to probably do, which is kind of, I'll have to get there first before I really can think about it, but some stuff with random computers and their quote-unquote random, pseudo-random number generation is that they're, depending on what seeds it is given, what seed it is given for its random generation at that moment, it'll have, sometimes you'll start seeing patterns within that quote-unquote randomness, pseudo-randomness, and that's not what I want. That's something, that's an issue that I still kind of have with my, uh, jewelry editions mod, is that sometimes if you say go into a jewelry shop and you open a shelf, you'll kind of sometimes see these kind of seemingly weird patterns where it's like everything on that shelf from my mod that got picked are of like the same variant of gem material or something. And yeah, even though that's, obviously something possible when you're dealing with quote unquote randomness, is that when you start seeing patterns like that, it's not so much due to that randomness per se, but it is the flaw with the pseudo random number generation, where it's like you do see a pattern due to poor, I guess, seeding or consideration of that kind of thing, especially for how fast it's happening in that sense. So the seed doesn't get switched around enough during that whole few milliseconds that it's happening kind of deal. So what I'll have to try to do, probably, I've never done this before, is do something with like hash codes, which is I don't even know how to really describe it, like kind of breaking down of a number or a letter and then using that to make a line of numbers or something like that, and then somehow using that to make like a random somehow using that to make a string of values that are somewhat random that can then be used as a seed to help randomize the thing. So I don't know how I'll do that, but I want to try to do something like that using like a hash code to make the seed part a little bit better and hopefully more random with less obvious patterns happening in this case. Like I don't want to just be like a really obvious pattern of like, oh, this dungeon generated with all mithril chest or something like that. I want it to be like a distribution that doesn't feel like it was not, just due to the kind of weird pseudo random number generation of computers kind of deal. Um, but yeah, with that, determine that as well as all the other properties like I said, the chest material, the material of the lock, some of the other aspects and stuff like that in this block here or whatever in this spot here, and then use that to create the chest with its properties, and then later on do more with that, obviously. But this is the main thing I'm trying to do, is determine what materials the chest should be made out of and its other properties based on whatever, as well as modified the odds of it and the chances based on stuff like the room context value we had and other things like that. But that's what I did today, and that's what I plan to hopefully do and finish tomorrow if possible. But yeah, I hope that was helpful maybe or interesting, but thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.